Welcome to the Hembury Books Podcast. Today we have Alex Adsett, a literary agent and publishing consultant with almost 30 years experience. She has worked at Simon & Schuster UK, Penguin Australia and Wiley, and she launched Alex Adsett Literary in 2008. She represents over 40 authors and illustrators, including Melissa Lucashenko, Peter Greste, Jodi, McAlister and Isobelle Carmody. Alex has also helped thousands of authors review and negotiate their publishing deals. Thank you for coming on the podcast, Alex.
Thanks for having me. It's lovely to see you.
Yeah, I was in your session at Byron Bay, where you were talking in a conversation with Pantera Press, Lexi.
Yeah. Lex Hurst, yeah.
That was really interesting. And then I came up to you at the end because I had wanted to invite you on the podcast for a while, and that was my chance to be able to do that. So it was a great festival, wasn't it?
Oh, look, I always have the best time at Byron. It's my favourite of all the festivals. You're not supposed to have favourites, but it's my local. And yeah, no, like until the rain came out on the last day, it was just the most amazing weekend. And even in the rain, it was still fabulous.
Yeah, I had to start the drive home, so I missed that one. But I was thinking, I'll be muddy, and that was unfortunate. So I would love to know how you became a literary agent, and having had very limited exposure to real live ones, I think about it as like really glamorous and really fun, and you're doing deals and negotiations and stuff. Is it like that? How did you begin?
Gosh, it's not that glamorous. It's often just me at home in my office. But there are deals. It is exciting, and I do it because I love it. So look, I've been in the industry ever since I had this, that I discovered there was a publishing industry, that there was an industry that its job was to make books happen. I became, focused very hard on joining it. So I took myself off to London and got a job at Simon & Schuster. I was already working as a bookseller through uni.
Oh, wow.
Job at Simon & Schuster in London, and then came back, finished off one of my degrees, got a job, then moved in Queensland, got a job in Melbourne with Penguin. But every time I lived somewhere grey and rainy, like London and Melbourne, I miss the sunshine of southeast Queensland. I'm very focused on sunshine. So I moved back up and I became the contracts manager at Wiley, while also starting my own business as a consultant. The idea being I help authors who don't have an agent negotiate the deal and the contract, make sure it's fair, but then walk away. And I always sort of said when the right manuscript came along, I'd make that jump into being an agent as well. And I did that. That was, 12 years ago now, I think. I never sold that very first manuscript, sadly, but it was the one that got me in the door in terms of, I think I'm an agent now. I've never given up the consultancy. That's still a huge part of my business in terms of helping authors, because no one else apart from the ASA's legal service offers that commercial advice on a freelance basis, and a lot of authors, that's all they need. But yeah, being an advocate for authors in general is something I'm very passionate about, and being an agent means I can be passionate and an advocate for the actual manuscripts as well.
Amazing. So the consultancy, what kinds of questions do authors come to you with? And are these authors that do not have an agent, or they want independent advice from someone?
Yeah, so these, as a consultant, it's authors that don't have an agent.
Okay.
They get the publishing deal, the offer themselves. And in Australia, that's possible. In Australia, about half of authors will get a publishing deal themselves through traditional means, and another half will probably go through an agent. And that's sort of separate to, the self-publishing authors, that are doing it all on their own.
Yeah.
So some authors do come to me and say, I've got a deal. Will you be my agent? I'm like, no, ethically, that's not okay. It's tricky because an agent really has to love the author and the manuscript. And what you want as an author is somebody who believes in you so much that they will work on something for years without a cent of payment, without any guarantee of ever getting paid. And that's the agency side of things, where it's commission only. Whereas the consultancy side of things, what if the author is really savvy about, they're well connected, they've got their own publishing deal,
Mm.
and all they need is help with that contract stuff. So what I do is, it's not legal advice. I have legal training, but it's not legal advice. It's commercial advice from somebody who knows the ins and outs of a good publishing contract. So
Amazing.
there are some lawyers that absolutely know this stuff as well. And the ASA's legal service is phenomenal too. But like your regular corner lawyer is not going to know what a good royalty structure looks like, is not going to know what a good reversion clause looks like, that kind of thing.
Mm.
So having someone who knows the industry means that an author can be told if something's fair, if it looks out of whack. A lot of times authors come to me and say, oh, look, the publisher told me it was standard, so I'm sure it's fine. And I'm like, no, because just because it's standard to that publisher doesn't mean it's standard to the entire industry.
Yeah.
I don't think there's one publishing contract in Australia that doesn't have some little niggle that isn't in accordance with industry standard. And sometimes these things are negotiable, sometimes they're not.
Mm.
But even if an author goes in and has to accept some things that aren't perfect, it doesn't mean some other things couldn't be improved. And at least they're going in with their eyes open.
Yeah, that is so important. I mean, I think I would struggle to not just sign it straight away. I'm sure a lot of authors at that point are just so happy to be chosen. It would
They
take,
are.
yeah, it would take a lot of strength to say, I just have to check this. Or I guess they're getting, there's something about it that they're uncomfortable with, perhaps.
Or it is just getting that peace of mind. Like, even if, look, you know, Penguin Random House are the biggest publisher in the world. The biggest doesn't mean the best. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's the right fit for you and your manuscript with that publisher. Like, you know, so it, and just because you're a debut, you've never been an author before, this is your dream. This is your dream publisher. It's your dream author. It's your dream book. All of this thing. It doesn't mean you can't go in and ask questions. And sometimes those questions means the deal might improve. And every author is different. So something that might matter desperately to you might not actually matter to the next person. But unless you go in and have that conversation with the publisher, you're never going to know if you can get it or not. Something I say to a lot of authors is, like, debut authors say to me, oh, I'll just sign it now and I'll negotiate more on the next one. That's so dangerous, I sort of think. But I also tell authors, you have more power as an unknown. You don't necessarily have a lot of power, but you have more as an unknown. When you're still, nobody knows how you're going to perform. Nobody knows what your book's going to do when it hits the market. You might become the next, you know, bestseller. So, you know, you've actually got a little bit more negotiating clout at that point than you might do in a few books' time when you are a known quantity. Who knows, you might become a bestseller and then you've got lots of negotiating power. But I really just recommend very strongly to authors that don't be afraid to ask questions. You never know what you're going to get. And it also shows to the publisher that you're taking this seriously. This is a business.
Yeah.
You have the respect for yourself and your work that you want them to have for you as well.
Yeah.
And any reputable publisher will respect that process.
Respect that. Yeah. Can you tell us about some of the most common questions that you get about the terms of a contract?
Yeah. I mean, generally authors want to know about the money side of stuff. Absolutely. That's the thing. So they want to know, is that royalty structure fair? Is this advance any good? And advances are so tricky because, you know, how long is a piece of string? You know, there are some contracts that have zero advance, some contracts that have a, you know, $500 or a few $1,000 advances, and then some contracts with $100,000 or more. You know, there's a huge thing. It really comes down to what the publisher thinks they're going to be able to sell. Advances, you know, if an author's absolutely newbie, an advance means it's in advance of the royalties. So for me, I actually think it's more important that an author gets a really good royalty and the royalty structure is there, because even if your advance is sort of middle of the road, say it's non-fiction and, you know, it's $15,000, $20,000 advance, which is sort of, you know, strong to average for a non-fiction in Australia. And there is no ballpark yet. That's just
sure.
out. But if that book becomes a bestseller, it's not like you're going to miss out if you accepted less than, maybe you could have pushed for, because if the royalties are there, it means you're getting the strongest amount per sale that you can. So with royalties, something a lot of authors say to me is like, if the standard royalty in Australia is 10% of the recommended retail price.
Yep.
But you've got to make sure it is of the retail price, not of net receipts, because that's a whole different, so 10% of retail price is about the equivalent of 20% net receipts. So sometimes less than ethical publishers will try to, pull a swift one on a publisher.
Is what the publisher gets after the bookseller has taken their cut.
Yeah.
Which is, so we're doing a lot of maths, but 55%.
Yes. So
or something.
Your average, your little corner book, your independent bookstore might be getting
10% of half the book.
Yeah, and it also depends. And then you get into the fine print. So your average little bookstore might be getting 45% discount, but your big W might be getting 55, 100%.
Yes.
So often a clause in the contract that says publishers can drop your royalty if they're giving a very high discount, which is fine if we're talking 60% or higher. But if we're talking 50% or higher, that means every sale to Big W, most sales to Dimmicks, most sales to Amazon are going to be at that half price. So that's something that you need to either really know yourself and know the fine print of, or go to somebody who knows what they're doing in terms of saying, no, that's tricky. That's being sneaky about how much they're taking off you.
Because so if it was a case of Big W, let's say the book was $30 and so 15, so it would be 10% of 15 would be $1.50 per copy. But if that book was dropped down to $18 or something, maybe no royalty from that Big W sale.
No, it goes to about half. So if Big W say was, and it depends, it's not about what Big W are doing, it's about what the publisher's contract with you is doing. But it might, if Big W are getting 55% discount, so a $30 book drops to, I don't know, I can't do math in my head, $12, $10.
Yeah.
You're going to be getting 10% net receipts of that, which becomes, so a lot less.
Like less than $1.
Less than $1, like sort of 50 cents-ish in many cases, versus the $3 you would be getting from a regular bookstore. It's
times higher. So, because I've heard that only 4% of authors earn out their royalties anyway. So isn't it better to get, or is that again?
No, look, it's, I would say maybe 1 in 5, 1 in 10. So more up, 15 to 20%, I think, of authors sort of make, earn back their advance. Earning back their advance doesn't mean they've made money for the publisher, but it definitely helps. It moves that forward. Yes, the big retailers like Big W and Amazon, they're a mixed blessing because they don't take every book. And if you get in with them, it means there's more exposure, there's more books printed, which makes the costings better for the publisher. You're reaching more people. So all of those are great, and all of those build your profile, which might help, sell through other markets as well, where you're actually getting a better royalty. And it might help your next book in terms of building your profile and building your reach. So all of those are good. But if you're discounting so much that you're not getting any percent on that or very tiny percent on those sales, then it's sort of also devaluing the book, devaluing your brand. There's definitely pros and cons with this.
There's a saying in the indie community about, like hitting the bestsellers and all of that, but that actually bank talks, not rank talks.
Yeah.
So it's how much is landing in your account. Like, focus on that. But of course, you want your book to be read. What about, you mentioned reversions in contracts. Can you, I'd love to hear more about that.
Yes, thank you. Reversions are my baby. I get very passionate and can talk for hours about reversion clauses. There's maybe 3 other people in the whole of Australia that care as much about reversion clauses as me. When we get together, it's a very nerdy conversation. But sorry, to backtrack, most publishing contracts, traditional publishing contracts, will ask for the copyright in your work, the license in your work for life of copyright, which is 70 years from the death of the author. So it's a really long time. So that's how long they could publish the book. The reality is that most books have a 5 to 10 year lifespan. Not all, like you've got bestsellers that have never left, being in print, and that's fantastic. But the reality is most books are not stocked in bookstores or selling much after 5 to 10 years. So a good reversion clause means that the publisher will keep the rights, will be able to keep the rights for as long as they're doing their job, which is selling your book. But if sales drop below a certain point, the author should be able to go back to the publisher and say, well, you've not managed to sell more than 100 copies in the last 12 months. I want to get my rights back. So there should be a clause in the contract that says that the author can do that. Now, a lot of those clauses need updating. Like they're still in the before times. They're still based on the before times of no ebooks or no print on demand, because the wording used to be if the book is out of print or the book is no longer available.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, because what was back when this was created, what was the author going to do? Were they going to approach another traditional publisher or something?
Yeah. So
give them avenue, because it was before anyway.
Yeah, before ebooks became a thing, it would become a lot trickier for them to do something with it. And that's their decision. Like they don't have to get the rights back, but it just gives them a bit more power rather than being trapped in a contract that lasts forever.
And your book is not available, or nothing's happening.
Even 20, 30 years ago, there was still an option for authors to self-publish a few copies themselves, or go around to smaller press, or just keep the rights themselves. Like if no one was doing anything, you may as well hold on to those rights by yourself. But now with the rise of self-publishing and more little independent small press as well, the author does have that control to get the rights back. So say you've published with 3 or 4 different publishers over the course of 15 years, those books have the sales have dropped. You've maybe become a self-published author yourself, or you're building your own brand, or things like that separately to that world. By pulling those rights back and having that kind of clause means that you can build your own profile and have that backlist. Because I think, as you've probably covered on other podcasts within that self-publishing world, one of the best things that can sell a new book is having backlists that you can package, that you can do price control, things with. And so if you're able to pull back that backlist from other publishers, that ball's back in your court.
I've been approached by a terrific author who wants me to publish her Picador backlist, because she's got this back, which is such an indication of a changing landscape. It's amazing. Yeah.
Look, I mean, you've still got all of the problems with how to get noticed, how to get audience to buy your book instead of everybody else's book out there. All of the same problems are there, but at least you're in charge if you can pull those rights back.
And there's no one better equipped to do that than you. If you have the passion for your own books, you can then go and take your books around.
Yeah, you're going to be passionate about them for longer than the traditional publisher is. And I am such a fan of traditional publishing. It's my world. It's what I do, and that's who I talk with. But just the nature of it is that they've only got a certain time frame because of all the other books coming through to focus on particular authors' books. So they're going to be in the best position to get your book into bookstores, to sell the international rights, to get the translation deals, to maybe get film deals, all of those things. But after 2, 3, 4 years, if it's not, a bestseller and it's not getting lots of wins, they have to move on to different projects.
Yeah, of course. Well after 3 years. I mean, maybe after a couple of months.
Sometimes, Look, in terms of that publicity on the ground, you usually have 1 month to 3 months really with them focusing. That doesn't mean they're not doing more. It just means they have to move their focus onto other things. Yeah. But international rights, like a good traditional publisher will, or an agent if you have one, will take your book internationally to try to get it translation deals, US, UK, things like that. And that process might last longer. So 24 months is more standard. But look, 5 years down the track, it's starting to lose that focus.
What does a not so great clause say around this, like in terms of it being quite restrictive? Because I also understand the publisher has invested financially in creating that book. So do you get the cover back? Do you need to make a new cover?
Yes.
They've formatted it, they've edited, they've invested financially. So does the author then kind of get a free product in a way, or?
Yes and no. Look, like a bad clause around this will say the author doesn't get the rights back unless the publisher decides it's no longer available. That's sort of one of the worst versions of this kind of clause. So it really has to tie into sales. So the publisher has to be selling, for Australia, I like to say 100 copies in 12 months.
Mm-hmm.
For America, I'd want that more to be up around 200, 250 so before the author can get the rights back. And when the author gets the right back, they do generally, unless there's something nasty in the contract, they will get the edited version back. But the publisher doesn't owe them the cover. That belongs to the publisher, and doesn't owe them the typeset files. So at that stage, the author sort of thinks, well, how much is it going to cost me to do it myself? A new cover, new typesetting, or can I go in and buy the files from the publisher? So usually, if it's amicable, which it usually is, they will sell them to you, but they don't have to make it free. They're under no obligation to do that.
Yeah, okay, that's interesting. Do you ever get contracts from indie authors?
Yeah, look, sometimes indie authors, I did have an author, one of yours, came to me and asked for advice on companies that will help them self-publish.
Yeah.
So that's not usually they are, if it's a company that is not pretending to be a traditional publisher, so it's a company that makes no bones about the fact that we are here to help you self-publish, then those are really straightforward. And
you had one of my clients check my contract. That's amazing. I didn't know that.
Because I didn't see the contract. They were just running some points past me.
I think I know who that was.
Honestly, I can't remember who it is.
That's amazing, because one of the things I think it's, I've got a contract lawyer who specializes in IP, and we have tried to make it as clear as possible that they own 100% of their intellectual property. They get 100% of royalties. We don't take any royalties. But even so, people come back saying, do I own the files, which is all, reasonable questions. But it's conveying as clearly as possible, I guess, because it's a new concept, that you just own everything. You make the investment up front with us in creating the book, but you own that book like you would own another business asset.
Yeah. And look, there's a lot of companies that do that ethically and being really transparent, and I have a lot of respect for them. So what I tell authors generally, if they come to me for advice on those, is look, get a few quotes.
Yeah.
So that comparing prices and services and what you're getting. The ones that I will tell an author this for free if I think they're about to sign up with a scammer.
Yeah.
And if they want to proceed, then my normal consultancy rates apply. But there are shark companies out there that try to pretend that they're a traditional publisher, but will be charging the author. So it should always be a red flag if there are fees involved, because you want a publisher who is making money off selling your book, not making money off you. If there's that fee involved, where are they making their money? And there are a bunch of companies that, I will automatically sort of say, look, they're not reputable. They are not a traditional publisher. They are masquerading as one. And there are other companies that are traditional publishers. They're that hybrid, that true hybrid, where they are either charging a fee or splitting the cost at risk.
Yeah, that's a complex business model. How do you share IP to me, and how do you transparently split the investment cost? That to me that would be really tricky to work out. Like, what does the publisher pay and what does the author pay? And then what does the publisher keep and what does the author keep for kind of entering? Yeah.
Look, there's a number of companies that do it right, I think. The trick with those are, so say usually the publisher will pay for everything, author is contributing the manuscript. And then when the publisher will keep a track, hopefully, properly, accountability of all the costs. And when those costs are earned out, so that's editorial costs, cover, typesetting, the big one is often marketing, distribution, printing. When all of those costs are earned out, then all of the profit is split 50-50. So that's fine as long as there's a really clear definition of what the costs are.
Yeah.
And the author has some control over them, because you don't want a situation where every time the author might just be about to actually get some money, another cost comes up. Often the best way, I think, to do that is to say, okay, the publisher's going to put in all of the costs up to the value of $5,000. The author puts in the manuscript. When it's earned back, the book sold enough copies to earn back that $5,000, everybody gets 50-50. Great. Yes, I don't agree with the author putting in any money at all. I don't think that's right in a hybrid. Like, they should be contributing the manuscript. Or the publisher's upfront about saying, okay, we think we can sell 3,000 copies to make our costings work. We really can't make the costings work unless we sell 4,000 copies. Are you able to come along as the author and buy 1,000 of those copies? Now, I've seen that done unethically and in a scam way, and I've seen it done ethically. So I would very highly recommend authors do their research.
And with indie, one of the beautiful things is not doing those massive print runs. There's no need to print books that you don't know if they'll sell. So that's why I prefer it. What is your take on an owner, the author of a book, and their intellectual property in that book, and not having the control that the publisher sort of owns that?
The publisher, well, you shouldn't, that's a big question. So generally the way traditional publishing contracts work is by license. So the publisher gets an exclusive license in the book. They shouldn't take the ownership of the copyright. That's called an assignment of copyright in Australia, or in America that's often termed around work for hire. But if it's a traditional publishing contract that's a license, the author remains the copyright owner. Full stop. Now, there's usually a clause in the contract that talks of, that publisher will edit the work. That's one of the reasons you're going to a publisher, is so that they will do a really professional edit. But there should always be a line in there, and this is something I, always put in my report, that no significant changes to the work will happen without the author's consent. So actual consent, which is different from consultation, which is just a chat, doesn't mean they have to listen to you. But if you consent, so that means that in all cases, the control of that is still sitting with the author. The author is unlikely to have control over the cover. That's really, again, what you're going with a traditional publisher to do. That's where you're consulted and you get your ideas in there. But at the end of the day, the publisher's going to be the expert on that, probably. You're not going to have maybe control over the typesetting. You're not going to have control over some of the marketing, but the actual words, the author should never give up control of.
Because I've heard stories, like where there's an Indigenous character and they've been told to take that out because they're worried that the author will be cancelled if they get it wrong. One author had the last 3 chapters of her book, they said it's got to go, and she always regretted that, but then ended up writing a whole second book that, so the reality is such, though, there's quite a power imbalance, isn't there? If the publishers take it out, the author's going to take it out.
There is. I mean, the author should always have the option to say no and then walk away if they can't reach that agreement. But at the same time, the publisher always has the right, should also have the right to say, well, either make these changes or we can't publish it. And if that relationship is down, then you go your separate ways. So the author should never be forced to do it. But if the publisher is there saying, you have a First Nations character, you haven't got, gone through the protocols to do this, you haven't had a sensitivity reader approve this, it's problematic in terms of both the backlash and problematic in terms of the right thing to do in publishing in the 21st century, then the author really needs to listen to that.
No, I don't think that, and it's happened different people have told me something similar, that there's a risk aversion because you want the book to be commercially viable, so you're not going to take risks. And that could include a white person writing about an Indigenous character, and just that there could be backlash. There was no suggestion that it was insensitive and that the author wasn't totally willing to get a sensitivity check, but there is a risk-averse culture that's growing.
Yeah, look, there is, and I stand by that actually, because I think there's so much damaging material. I think a sensitivity read is the minimum that needs to be done, and there's so much more work. So the Copyright Agency, the Australia Council, there's a lot of work being done on the best protocols for authors to do in this space, and publishers are across this. So yes, it's risk adverse, but it's risk adverse because they're actually seeing the backlash, and it's risk adverse because they're actually seeing it cause real damage in the First Nations communities. So
it's a tricky one. You always want literature, though, to be, you know, free expression of idea. I mean, that is one reason why I love the indie community, because you can publish books that a traditional publisher wouldn't touch with a 10-foot barge pole. Yeah. And they're very interesting books, and it's very easy to get media coverage. So that's, you know, I guess it's just differences in that way, because a bold book should be bold, but they shouldn't be offensive. They're like, you know, two different things, but mistakes will be made, I think.
Yeah, look, there's downright offensive. There's also damaging, even with the best of intentions.
Yeah.
So I would say whether somebody's publishing independently or through a traditional publisher, following the protocols that are being put in place from the Creative Australia is so important. If you want to be doing the right thing. So that's the thing. Most authors who talk to me about this want to do the right thing, and they're writing First Nations characters because they want to do the right thing. But unless you are following some of these protocols, you're actually doing more harm than good.
Yeah. I don't know any author that wouldn't. Just the result being, you know, which Will Yeoman of Writing WA was saying yesterday, is boring books.
Yeah, well, the publishers, though, don't want to publish boring books. Boring books don't sell.
No,
but
it's a tricky line. Sure,
but you don't need to be not following protocols and doing harm to make a book not boring.
Yeah, but I think it's more that the suggestion was to remove the character rather than go through the protocols. That was the issue.
Well, in which case, look, the publisher might not have the time to do that. And if the author was not wanting to put in that time on their own.
No, the author would have done it.
You know, a way to go forward. But it is a tricky line. And look, publishers are not generally, like there are some bad eggs, but on the whole, publishers are trying to do the right thing for the book, for the community, and to be a good citizen in our world in terms of doing the right thing and redressing some of the damage that's been done in past decades. So I think it would be a very foolish author not to listen to that in good faith, not just go, oh, you're trying to cramp my style, but to actually listen at some of the reasons, because there is huge backlash here.
I think, no, I'm not suggesting that the author wasn't willing to do any of the things, but those things weren't being suggested. It was the character has to go. Anyhow, let's move on to your work as a literary agent in the time that we've got left. What does a typical day look like?
You never know in advance, really. It's mostly, look, it's emails. It's just this never-ending tsunami of emails.
Pictures, heaps of pictures is what you're getting.
Actually, is in a whole separate account. And manuscript submissions usually get read, you know, at 2 p.m. on a Saturday afternoon, because that's the only time you can find to read submissions. The day-to-day is managing existing authors. It's talking with publishers. It's putting out little fires of, you know, my cover's come through and I don't love it. Or the publisher saying, we tried to get this publicity deal and it didn't work out. Or there's so millions and millions of things. Just that, it takes up the day. Reading is sadly not a big part of it, and my submissions as an agent go through my submission portal, so I don't see those on a day-to-day basis. it's managing the finances for the authors. It's helping support them through whatever process they're at in the book, the writing of it, the editorial, marketing, all of these things are part of, day-to-day life for the author. And as an agent, you're involved in that as well. A part of my day-to-day, I guess, or, week to week is planning festivals that I'm appearing at or conferences that I'm going at to pitch my author's books. So I attend film conferences every year to pitch the film rights. I attend the Sydney Writers Festival, which has a component of it pitching to international publishers. All of these things, flights, accommodation, no one else is doing this for me. Gosh.
So my dream of your day is like, you start the day and there's like 30 manuscripts waiting for you saying like, pick me, and you have to find the star in that. But you're saying that's actually a fraction of your week.
It really, that's the weekend.
Wow.
Is the reading. And yes, it is that. Like when I get to focus on that. So, and there's always this guilt as an agent, always feeling guilty that you could be doing more, that there's all these authors that, are putting their hopes and dreams on you, which could all be in my head, but I still carry a lot of guilt about it.
No, that's so nice that you feel that way. It is a big burden. That's a lot of hopes and dreams.
It is. But I guess my duty lies in the first instance to my existing authors. So when they submit the manuscript, they get priority. They're the ones I owe that duty to read. And I'm not very speedy at reading their manuscripts. I'm trying to get better. We've got a process.
Can I make one suggestion? I just got Speechify this week and it's changing my world. And you just have it on your phone and it just converts any text document, EPUB file, and you just press play.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, give it a go.
That does sound amazing, but also don't take my audio-free listening time away from me. Because that's my driving, is I listen to actual books. But yeah, so it's that manuscripts, and then all of the other manuscripts from emerging authors or authors that are submitting to the agency that I haven't signed up yet, they have to be second fiddle. And then within that, the days that I go to my submission portal and actually look at the hundreds of manuscripts in there and go, okay, how do we tackle this? How do we go through? So I get 400 to 500 manuscripts a year, and I generally will maybe take one of those, if that. Just because I've got to be that brutal.
Yeah, and you have, in total, your agency has 3 literary agents.
3 others than me, so 4 total.
So probably 2,000 manuscripts a year is probably what you're receiving, and you might take 4.
They're taking more, my other agents, because they're new and they're building up their list still.
Sure, okay.
So I've kind of got that. It was about 50. It's down to about 45 authors in my list. So for me to add on a new author to manage in that process is a lot.
45 is a lot.
Yeah, and those are the ones I owe my duty to ongoing, and that's separate from my consultancy authors who come just for a contract and then go away again. So I might see a couple of hundred of those a year, but that sort of sits in a different bit of my brain. And then it's that reading the manuscripts, because you're looking for those manuscripts that you fall in love with, that make you forget that you're reading. Then you sort of look at the author and kind of think, well, is this an author that I could work with? And do I want to work with them long term? And then you sort of think, well, is the market ready for this manuscript? Is there a pathway for it? But number one has to be, do I fall in love with this manuscript? So because I'm so picky now, it takes a lot for me to fall in love with it.
Can you please tell us what makes you fall in love with a manuscript?
No,
Can you even put your finger on it?
There's nothing. It's that I have to forget that I'm reading. I have to kind of think, well, I'm just going to give this one 5 minutes, and then suddenly look up and it's 3:00 in the morning and you finished it in one go. That's that magic.
Level. Your bar is so high.
It really is.
Yes. turn away some amazing books, though.
I do. I do. And that's the thing. So I say this to authors a lot. Because my bar is so high in terms of I have to love it, I say no to great manuscripts. I say no to manuscripts that are incredibly commercial, that are working on so many levels. But if I don't love it, for whatever the reason is, and who knows what that reason is half the time, then I'm not going to be the best advocate for it. So
Sure.
Don't take a no from anyone as, oh, I'm rubbish, the manuscript's terrible. It's just not right for that person.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been amazed by the quality of manuscripts in the very short time that I've been operating. It's just amazing and delightful, you know, the incredible talent. So what I love saying is yes, because I say yes. If it's not offensive or harmful, you know, I have parameters, but I say, let's publish your book. Let's go and do it. You know what I mean? And I try to do that in a cost-effective way for the author because I want them to get their return on investment back. So I want them to be successful. Do people that you've said no to ever come back with snarky replies?
Sometimes. That's a huge red flag if they do.
Isn't it?
Yeah, it's look, rarely. They're like 1 in 500 might come back with a snarky. Oh no, 1 in 1,000. But because like 2 reasons. One, most people are lovely, so we work in a wonderful industry, so you just generally don't get that personality type. But also, it's a continuum, like it's such a community. And just because I said no to something now doesn't mean I might not say yes to one of your manuscripts in a year or 3 years, and so much comes back to how you carry yourself with that no. So a no is like, it's going to be a no for that manuscript, but it's not a no for you. Yeah. Unless you've submitted 5 times in the space of 30 days and I say, please do not send me any more submissions, that is a no forever for you. But again, they're very rare, 1 in 1,000. And because I once had an author who I said no to, and they'd obviously forgotten we were Facebook friends, because they went on Facebook and just went on this rant about, oh, my life is over and it's so terrible and everybody's rejected me and now I've been rejected by another agent and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I'm right here, buddy. Like,
oh my gosh,
what are you doing? And it's that to me is like, well, okay, I don't want to work with that author ever.
No,
that melodramatic and
unprofessional. You don't. Unprofessional.
Yeah. Whereas some of the best things is I'll say no, and they'll come back and go, look, thanks very much for considering me, and then I'll see them at a conference in a year, and I'll see how their writing might have grown, how they're interacting with their peers, how they're part of the writing community, and I sort of think, well, that's an author that I want to work with one day. Yeah. And then it's a case of, well, are we ever going to find the right manuscript that's a fit
for the market at the right time? Yeah. I'm conscious of your time, but I just really want to ask because you are so tapped in to the industry and with, you know, what is really successful, how important is platform to an author, and particularly non-fiction? That's a question, you know, I often wonder about.
No, look, it's a good question, because for fiction, platform is actually not that important at all. Whereas non-fiction, it is very important, hugely important, because non-fiction is one of the biggest selling things in Australia. Like, you know, it's a very successful genre, depending on the subcategories of it. But one of the biggest things that moves that is for non-fiction is, why this author? Like, what's going to make somebody walk into a bookstore or, you know, or online and say, well, there's all of these things out there competing for my attention. There are podcasts, there are, you know, news articles, there's TV, there's Netflix, there's everything. What's going to make me read something from this author and believe this author? So I'll get submissions from authors saying, I've written The Meaning of Life and it's going to change the world and it's going to make peace and harmony across, like sure, maybe you're right, but why does anyone care? Why you? What's your platform? What have you done that's going to make your voice stand out? And that's why platform is so important in non-fiction, because you are talking, because it's so much that person is the ambassador for the work.
And that translates into numbers and followings on different platforms and things like that. Like they need to have over 40K on LinkedIn or something like that.
Oh, different platforms mean different things. Like, so depending on the genre, like publishing as an industry, publishing doesn't use LinkedIn very much at all. But other industries do. Publishing's a lot more on, like, so if you're a cookbook writer, you know, your following is really going to be Instagram and TikTok. Like that's where it needs to grow.
Newsletter subscribers, important as well.
It's look, yes and no. It depends on what you're writing and where, and it also depends on how engaged your market is. Like there's no point saying, well, I have 1 million subscribers if the newsletter arrives in their inbox and they hit delete on it. But if you've got 1 million subscribers and they're all engaged, and if you say, hey, 1 million subscribers, I'm doing a talk in Brisbane on this date, and they all show up, like,
yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah. And I know there's metrics. I don't understand them, but I know there are metrics on working out how engaged your audience is versus the actual number versus the engagement versus what country and where they are and the demographic and the book buying capability of them. All of those things do play in. None of them are as a guarantee of success.
No.
There's lots of things that can still go wrong, but having that and building that as a trusted voice in that space really works. So, you could have a lot fewer followers, but if they're in a very targeted market in a niche and you're the trusted voice in that niche, then that might mean a lot more than being, you know, having a huge number of followers, but not being a trusted voice in that space.
Okay, that's really interesting. Now, finally, if someone watching this has had their manuscript rejected multiple times, what would your advice be to them?
So rejected multiple times from traditional publishing or agents, I guess.
Let's say that they're on their 5th rejection and they're starting to doubt their book. What would you say?
5th is not many. Like, okay, 100 is many. Sorry, no, there's not 100 publishers in Australia. There's traditional ones. There is in America. So if your market is actually going to be the US or the UK, and you're looking, like, one, you actually really need an agent if you're going into the US or the UK markets directly. But regularly you hear stories of authors approaching, 50 to 100 agents. You only need one good yes, is the thing. It also depends what you want for your career. Like if this is your one-off book and in the nonfiction space, and you want it's going to help your career in other ways to have that book out there, or you're a public speaker and you have a platform, then if you've really exhausted all of the options for a traditional publisher or agent, then you can start looking at that, self-publishing space. If that's what you want, because if you're a fiction writer and you want a career as a fiction writer or a career as a non-fiction writer, then rushing out and self-publishing your first book on the basis of 5 rejections, I would say is premature, unless you really love that becoming essentially a small publisher in your own right. I would say write another book is the other thing. Join a community of other writers to get critical feedback and give critical feedback yourself. Generally, I would encourage authors not to rush into self-publishing, because self-publishing well is hard. It's so hard. And that doesn't mean just producing a beautiful book. That means all of the marketing and publicity around it. So writing more books, at the worst, you've got Backlist that you can then end up self-publishing all together. At the best, you will get better and better and better as a writer and grow in your writing and grow in your ideas and what you're doing, and you will nail that, traditional publishing deal later down the track.
And there's quite a number of success stories where someone has published and then they've been picked up by a traditional publisher for future books.
Yeah, well, for future books, absolutely.
Yeah, not the same book, but
no, almost impossible. Not impossible. Almost impossible to be traditionally picked up for a book you've already self-published.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of authors who do say, "I self-published, will you take me on now?" And you're like, no.
No, because it's hard enough to promote a new book. It's not new anymore.
Yeah. And look, the first bite of that cherry is often family and friends and building word of mouth. So if you've self-published and you've already sold it to family and friends, then there's nowhere almost to build for an agent or a publisher taking you on then. But look, yes, there is lots and lots of, just because you've self-published your first book doesn't mean that you won't get picked up for others.
Mm.
If you're in that non-fiction space and say you're an expert on wine, and that's your thing, and you've got a column and you've got a podcast and you do all of that, if you've self-published your first book and it hasn't been a success, then it is hard to come back from that to say, well, I've written another wine book, traditional publisher, please take me on. It's harder to, if you can't point to a successful first book. Because if that's where you got all your first ideas and your big ideas, and you're fresh to the scene and you're exploding out there, like bullet a gate.
Would the second book be better? Yeah.
So if the author has an answer to that, and say the second book is better because X, Y, and Z, then that's great. You can always spin the story to make a compelling argument for why. But you've got to find that why.
Yeah. And I think most people that self-publish, they're really entrepreneurial, and because you're putting your own money into it, you're going to make damn sure that it is a success. So you will reach out. I mean, the people that I work with, like the stuff they do to promote their book is extraordinary and so creative. And, all the speaking opportunities, and they contact podcasts, and they're self-starters. They're not going to wait around for someone to say, here's an opportunity. I hired a publicist for my book, and I wouldn't do it without a publicist,
Yeah. Absolutely. But it's all expensive. It's all cost, and you can put in money and still not see the sales.
I think if you're a business person, the book needs to come out because soon it will be redundant. So, if it's a memoir or something, that can wait. If it's fiction, it can wait, unless it's like a social issue or something. And so you really need to get your book out and to build your credibility as an expert, because if you publish it, you can attract higher clients because you're an expert from your book, and the speaking opportunities increase, and you can take your book. Like, a lot of business people want to take their book when they speak. So they really need to have access to their book, and then they have their royalties. So I think for a business person, it's a different proposition. But for someone who this is the book of their life or something, they can probably be more patient.
Yeah, look, it depends, I think, a lot of circumstances outside the book itself. So if, yes, you've got an author who's a public speaker who is going and wants the book to do that, then to be with them, or it will build their profile, or they're an academic and it will build their profile. And if there's another reason to do it, that makes it timely, then that builds the reasons to put that money in and invest that time and energy. But if you can wait, if your dream is to be an author rather than have the book support one of your other dreams, then there's sometimes slower ways to do it.
But the odds are so low that you will get picked up if it's a 1 in 500, or even some books, they just won't exist. Like, I can see myself as like getting all the manuscripts sitting in drawers around Australia. Let's bring them out and give them some air, because people say, okay, my book has been rejected, it'll never get published, I give up. I give up my dream of becoming an author. And I think that's so sad, because I was heartbroken. Heartbroken. And then I was like, I can self-publish this book. And then I did it again because I fell in love with the process and the creative freedom. So now I'm like, I want to help other people. And for a lot of people, it's sharing their story with the world. They don't have dreams of like selling heaps of units. They want to build their tribe and have their people and to get great reviews and stuff like that. And that's more important than like not doing it, or doing it like on a really grand scale.
Look, yes and no. I think it's still very hard to self-publish well, to get the reviews, to get your word out there. And if your dream is to get the word out there, but you publish it and you put all of this money in and all of this time, and you still ended up getting only 100 reviews and selling a few hundred or a few thousand copies, then are you going to feel more crushed and be, quite amazing. A bit? And I think that's a question that everyone needs to ask, because some people do this and feel so happy and fulfilled that they've done it, and others feel crushed and that they've wasted their time and money. So I really think it's down to the individual to do their research and to really ask what's motivating them, because it's not for everyone. But I love that self-publishing exists as an option for authors.
Yeah.
I love that it's not this gatekeeper system that stops all these voices getting out there. But I also see the other side of a lot of heartbroken authors that have done it.
Yeah.
Hasn't been what they wanted.
Yeah.
And they're really left feeling bereft because of that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why it's hard to solve all the pieces of the puzzle, but because I want every author to succeed and to get back their reinvestment at least and continue writing books, like to keep coming back and love their author career.
Yeah.
It's how to do lean marketing, smart marketing, that kind of thing. Because there's a lot of shiny objects and I chased most of them and you can burn a lot of money. So how do we do this? But I try to approach it. I'm an author and I want to succeed. I want royalties and I want my clients to get royalties. So how, in this kind of changing landscape, direct to consumer is a really big opportunity, I think, for authors nowadays. So how can we create those opportunities? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, look, I mean, self-publishing has been out there for 10, 15 years now, and it's
improved heaps.
Look, the yes and no, it's still just as hard to get noticed as ever. Look, Book Talk has made a big difference in fiction, and different ways and different formats for platforms have shifted, but it's still hard. It's still so hard to get noticed, even if you do everything right. So my warnings sort of sit there that we really need to think about where their priorities and like what they're doing it for and what they're hoping to get out.
Okay. That has been amazing. Thank you so much for talking to us. It's so many from the absolute top of the tree is really cool to hear how things work.
Yeah. No, well, lovely talking to you and best of luck with everything.
Thank you. Bye, Alex.
See ya.